With less than a month to go for Election Day, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump continue their final push for the White House. Both candidates are locked in a neck-and-neck race in all those battleground states from the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt. In this exceedingly close race, both candidates are trying to bag undecided voters in the crucial swing states. Harris and Walz are upping their media appearances, while Trump is targeting his strongholds. Now, today marks 1 year since Hamas's surprise attack on Israel, where around 1,200 people, mostly Israeli civilians, were killed. 250 hostages were captured. Currently, around 100 hostages have not been returned, a third of whom are believed to be dead. Since that day, on October 7th, things have just gotten worse. More than 41,000 people have been reportedly killed in Gaza since the start of the war, as Israel continues to mount its offensive to wipe out Hamas. Now, fighting has expanded to Lebanon, where hundreds there have been killed and over 1 million people displaced as Israel tries to cripple Hezbollah, a group backed by Iran. Now, Israel is left fighting battles on multiple fronts. Israel appears to be inching closer to a direct conflict with Iran. All of this as the US heads to the polls in that hotly contested election. Now, let's get you more on this. We're joined by Jennifer Smits-Kilgus. She has 15 years of experience working in the US Senate and the White House, along with other agencies. She's now a senior lecturer at the Hague University of Applied Sciences. We're also joined by also Republican strategist, that's Matt Klink. He joins us as well this morning here on NDTV. Now, Jennifer, let me come to you first. The US election is just weeks away. A senior Middle East analyst at the Hudson Institute, a think tank, says that Israel will do what it wants during this period, and before the next president takes office in January, Israel will step up its attacks, essentially. Others say that Israel will only continue to be emboldened by this election cycle. What's your take on the issue?
My take on the issue is that nobody, no candidate, nor will President Biden make any kind of definitive decision or make a definitive statement on what is going on in the Middle East. So what Trump has said is that he said that Israel should give retaliatory bombs to the Iranian nuclear plants. Kamala Harris dodged a question on 60 Minutes the other day about whether or not Netanyahu was a close ally, yes or no. So Trump will continue to make incendiary statements, but I don't think anyone will give a definitive plan forward until after the elections.
All right, Matt, what about you? What do you think? Is Israel going to use this as a window of opportunity?
Israel is going to do whatever it sees in its best interests. And in the Biden and Harris administration, I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government have made the calculation that while America may say all the right things, that they're behind Israel, the reality is that they're not. And in your case in point is the Biden-Harris administration have delayed key weapons. They have encouraged ceasefires, or when Iran bombed Israel the first time, they said, quote unquote, take the win and don't respond. So what you're seeing Israel increasingly do is they're just not listening to the Biden and Harris administration. They're going to do what's in their best national security interests. And I think that Benjamin Netanyahu has made the calculation that he would rather get rid of Hamas and, to the greatest extent possible, Hezbollah now, because he could have a very unreliable partner in the White House if Mrs. Harris wins on November 5th.
Jennifer, the key swing state of Michigan has one of the largest Arab American populations in the U.S. One high-level member of that community has endorsed Trump. He's the mayor of Hamtramck now. And if you recall, also Arab American groups wanted a pro-Palestinian speaker to be given a speaking slot on the main stage on the Democratic convention. Harris pushed back. That did not happen. How would you say Harris is handling this crucial demographic of Arab and Muslim voters?
What Harris has said, and what she has continually said, is that she condemns the violence on both sides. So she condemns the invasion of Israel by Hamas, and she has also been very forthright in saying that there is humanitarian suffering and that humanitarian aid must go to Gaza. How this plays out in the election is very tight. It's going to get, I think, even tighter until Election Day. Voting has already started, and it's proven to be a very tight race. And what I think is going to happen is that no vote is going to be left unturned, or no person is going to be left aside in this election. So whether it's Jewish voters, that Trump is trying to get the Jewish voters on his side, whether Kamala Harris is trying to encourage Arab American voters to vote for her, we're going to see a lot of this until November 5th.
All right, Matt, let's just talk a little bit more about those Jewish voters. Trump has made some blistering remarks on the issue. He said that Jewish voters who do not support him need to get their heads examined. He has insisted that he is their protector, and most recently suggested that if he loses, it will be their fault. Now, some say the comments are offensive. They will do nothing to win Jewish voters, but actually do the opposite. Your thoughts?
Well, first, a couple of responses. First, is Trump making offensive comments? I'm shocked if your viewers are shocked by those statements. That's part and parcel of Donald Trump's persona ever since he first announced for the presidency. Look, the Democrats are in a big pickle here because they want to have their cake and eat it too. In that they say the Democrats say that they support Israel, but they're also trying to thread the needle because they don't want to alienate those Jewish voters and the far left Hamas caucus in the Democratic Party that actually supports the actions that Hamas did on October 7th. So they're in a big pickle. Donald Trump is pointing out the obvious, that this is a gentleman who moved the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This is a man that initiated the Abraham Accords that brought about more economic partnerships in the Middle East. And under Biden-Harris, the Middle East is near World War III, with Yemen, Hamas, Hezbollah, and now Iran 2 times attacking Israel. So much for that vaulted a more stable world that Joe Biden promised when he was elected. Anything but that is the case right now. The world is nearly in flames thanks to the Biden and Harris administration.
Jennifer, what do you think? Because Trump has previously struggled to secure Arab votes, so his focus really should be on those Jewish voters. But Trump not making much win with Jewish voters, would you say, with rhetoric like that?
I don't think it's a winning rhetoric. Many Jewish organizations have come out and said that it fans the flames of anti-Semitism. We'll see the results of it come Election Day. As I say, it's a very, very tight race. Every vote counts, and I think Jews as well as Arab Americans will be watching very closely what both Trump and Harris say leading up to the election.
All right. Now, Matt, the Biden administration has allowed a steady flow of weapons and aid to Israel to the tune of billions of dollars, as we know. No conditions have been set on that use. It can be seen as a failure to peace, but there are some analysts who actually suggest that this is no failure. This is the Biden administration pressing the reset button in the Middle East. At least that's what one of the former State Department officials who resigned because of the war said, that this is not simply a tragedy of errors. What do you think?
Well, I think that's a joke on its face, and in reality, the Biden and Harris administration have limited the flow of weapons. They denied Israel the 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs that they originally requested. They've asked repeatedly for a ceasefire, even though Israel was attacked on October 7 by Hamas terrorists. By the way, in a coordinated attack with the Yemenis, who have closed down for all intents and purposes, the Suez Canal, and by Hezbollah that has been launching rockets, all coordinated by Iran, which the Biden administration, through lax oil sanctions, has allowed hundreds of billions of dollars to go to the largest state sponsor of terror. So Anthony Blinken and his politicized State Department can say whatever they want, but the record shows otherwise. and the world knows that the Middle East is a far more dangerous place under Biden and Harris than it ever was under Donald Trump administration.
Jennifer, what do you think? Do you think that this is a deliberate attempt by the Biden administration to press that reset button in the Middle East? They're doing pretty much what they're doing, and this is not really a failure?
I think you have to go back to when Biden pulled out U.S. forces of Afghanistan, and he made a pledge in that speech that there would be no new boots on the ground in any wars in the Middle East or in Afghanistan. So I think sending weapons is a substitute for boots on the ground, and I think it's going to be very difficult for America not to get involved, especially as the war escalates between Israel and Iran.
All right, Jennifer and Matt, do stay with us. We'll come back to you in just a few seconds. Let's get our viewers a quick update on this next story. 4 years after the last U.S. election, and many Republicans are still struggling to admit that former President Donald Trump lost the White House in 2020. Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton and Speaker Mike Johnson are the latest Republicans who denied Trump losing the election. In an NBC interview, Senator Tom Cotton questioned an NBC anchor on whether she could definitely prove that Trump lost the 2020 race. His remarks come on the heels of J.D. Vance's refusal to admit Trump's defeat during last week's debate with Tim Walz. Now, Jennifer and Matt still with us. Jennifer, to you first. What's the strategy here, if you can even call it that?
What's the strategy? Well, I think if Trump really did not lose the 2020 election, he would be the incumbent and not the former president. And I do think that this is a strategy to stir up MAGA support for legal battles for contests in certain states.
Matt, you're a Republican strategist. What do you think about all this talk of Trump having not lost the election?
Well, look, first of all, I mean, it's obvious that Joe Biden won the election, as Jennifer so rightly pointed out, because he's sitting in the Oval Office. But the fact that Tim Walz didn't answer a question, or that J.D. Vance didn't answer a question posed by Tim Walz, that's not a requirement in any debate. And I would point out that if you're going to hold him to that standard, neither did Tim Walz answer the question that J.D. Vance asked about government censorship. So again, this is just the American national news media that is obsessed with January 6th, and the majority of Americans at this point, they're beyond that. What they realize is that under the Biden and Harris economy, you pay more to live less, that every consumer staple is more expensive, gasoline costs more, the world is a much, much less safe place under the Biden and Harris administration. And more disturbingly, from a cultural standpoint, you have Tim Walz, voting to put tampons in the boys' bathroom in high schools in Minnesota, and Kamala Harris saying that she wants to provide government-funded sex change operations for people that are in this country illegally and for prisoners. So they're the real radicals here. And I think that that's why this election is where it is, and why Donald Trump right now, well, the polls show it's effectively tied in the 7 swing states. That means that Donald Trump is in the lead because he underperforms in polls and overperforms on the election day.
Jennifer, a quick reaction from you on what you just heard.
Well, I think Trump, although you say that he's really, great in so many ways, I think he is a liar, and he lies a lot, and he uses his position of power to take advantage of people. He has been discriminatory towards so many different categories of people throughout the United States, and he is chaotic and unpredictable, especially in foreign policy. And during his presidency, he did not even have the patience to sit through the daily security briefing. So I worry that if he takes office, what happens to the Middle East?
And yet, Jennifer, when he was president, we had no new wars. Contrary to Kamala Harris, the U.S. does have boots on the ground in the Middle East right now. We have troops in Iraq and in Syria, even though Kamala Harris misspoke or maybe lied in the debate on that. And you have the disastrous pullout from Afghanistan. So the world is much more in doubt and vulnerable under the weakness of the Biden and Harris administration. It was much more stable under Donald Trump. So you can say what you want, but the facts prove otherwise.
All right, guys, do stay with us. We want your reaction on another story that's unfolding right now, that Florida is gearing up, as you know, for what could be the biggest evacuation in 7 years as Hurricane Milton heads towards populated areas like Tampa and Orlando. This comes just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene caused more than 200 deaths and catastrophic damage from Florida and other states. Florida has expanded its state of emergency as it braces for the storm, which is now strengthened and has been declared a Category 4 hurricane. Now, Jennifer, you've been tracking the story, and of course, Matt, you as well. We've heard a lot of misinformation coming in from Trump, Jennifer, talking about how funds for this for Hurricane Helene, at least, were not diverted to the right people, the people who've been affected in North Carolina and elsewhere, but actually diverted to problems on the southern border. What do you make of Trump's latest comment and his misinformation there?
Well, that's, I think, a classic Trump disinformation move. The FEMA funds were intended to go where they were intended to go, and they reached the people that they needed to reach. So Trump used it as a political stunt to further his campaign and to win over votes and to try and use the social media machine to push out lies about where the funding was going.
Except that it's not. It's an indisputable
Matt,
fact.
what do you think? Is this really going to win out?
Well, except that it's not. It's an indisputable fact that FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, spent $1.01 billion to fund the Biden and Harris open border policy. And Alexander Mayorkas, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, went on and said that they would have to request more money for the initial Hurricane Helene. The problem is that the federal government response to rural communities in North Carolina and Georgia, ironically enough, some of the most Republican counties and precincts in those two states, has been woefully slow. So they can say all they want is that we have the money, but the aid's not getting where it needs to go. FEMA was not prepared for this, but they were really prepared when they've let in 10 to 12 million people into our country illegally. So, yeah, it is a big deal. And just as Hurricane Katrina was... I'm sorry, go ahead.
The money, though, that FEMA says, it comes from a different pot entirely. Don't mix up the southern border issue with the aid going out for Hurricane Helene.
Their main job, Federal Emergency Management Agency. This was their main job, the hurricane. They took their eye off the ball and spent $1.01 billion on people in this country illegally because the Biden and Harris administration cares more for illegal immigrants than it does for certain American citizens. So it's a very easy connection to make, and you don't have to be a government expert to see that connection being made. And that's why people in Georgia and North Carolina are frustrated, because the federal government is not doing what it needs to do.
Thanks very much indeed, Jennifer and Matt. Spent a lot of time with us here on NDTV this morning. Appreciate it.